Alright guys, we are going to be reacting to inside Ukraine ruins. Russian soldiers deliver aid to civilians. Jump in.
Wars are not only measured by how fast armies move forward, they are measured by who can hold ground, secure populations, and impose order when the front line shifts. Across eastern Ukraine, Russian forces are operating with a clear pattern. Military pressure continues at key sectors, while controlled areas see growing civilian engagement and logistical presence. This approach suggests the conflict entering a phase where endurance matters more than speed. Recently, a wave of videos from eastern Ukraine has drawn attention far beyond the battlefield. Instead of explosions, these clips show Russian soldiers moving through snow-covered villages in Donetsk and Luhansk, carrying food packages, toys, and holiday gifts. It is a side of the conflict rarely emphasized in Western coverage, yet difficult to ignore. According to Russian sources, troops from the Western, Central, and Eastern military groupings have carried out humanitarian visits across areas now under Russian control. Units from tank and motorized rifle formations visited elderly residents, large families, and children in boarding schools, delivering basic supplies intended to ease daily hardship. What stands out most is the emotional response of local civilians. Elderly residents are seen thanking soldiers, some visibly moved. Children approach calmly, without signs of fear. These reactions do not automatically indicate political loyalty, but they do reflect deep exhaustion after years of instability and constant pressure from the war. For many people in these eastern regions, especially older generations, Russia is not perceived as a distant or foreign force. Shared language, cultural ties, and memories of the Soviet era continue to shape perspectives. In villages worn down by conflict, the arrival of organized troops bringing order and supplies can feel like relief rather than disruption.
So a lot of people were giving those arguments that a lot of these folks that live in the eastern side of Ukraine are ethnically Russians. That's an argument that I heard a lot.
From Moscow's perspective, these humanitarian moments are not separate from military operations. Russian officials argue that holding territory requires more than firepower. It requires restoring daily life. Food distribution, civilian engagement, and visible presence are presented as signs that these areas are transitioning from chaos toward routine. Alongside these scenes, Russia has also reported steady progress on the battlefield in recent weeks. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, additional settlements and fortified positions have come under Russian control across the Donetsk direction, parts of the Kupiansk axis, and tactical zones in the Zaporizhia sector. These moves are described as controlled and deliberate, prioritizing consolidation over speed. In Donetsk, Russian forces claim to have secured long-contested areas that had remained under artillery fire for extended periods. Moscow frames these developments as the gradual dismantling of Ukrainian defensive networks, limiting Kyiv's ability to rotate troops and maintain supply lines near the front. Further north, near Kupiansk, Russian units report pushing Ukrainian forces out of exposed positions. While these locations may appear small on the map, Russian military analysts emphasize their tactical value, road access, elevated terrain, and defensive depth that influence the broader front line. In the south, particularly along the Zaporizhia front, Russian sources describe the capture of forward Ukrainian positions rather than major towns. These actions are presented as measures to stabilize the front and prevent future Ukrainian counteroffensives, reflecting Russia's preference for sustainability over dramatic advances. Ukraine's response remains firm and consistent. Kyiv rejects Russian claims of liberation and insists that fighting continues in many of the areas Moscow lists as secured. Ukrainian officials argue that any Russian gains come at significant cost and do not alter the overall strategic picture. Ukrainian messaging continues to focus on civilian suffering and international support. Kyiv accuses Russia of using humanitarian footage to legitimize military control and maintains that all territories under Russian administration remain occupied under international law. NATO's position closely mirrors Ukraine's stance. The alliance rejects Russian territorial claims outright and emphasizes that borders cannot be changed by force. NATO officials generally avoid commenting on individual villages, instead highlighting continued military assistance to Ukraine and warning against what they describe as Russian information warfare. From Russia's point of view, these reactions do little to change realities on the ground. Moscow argues that control is defined not by diplomatic statements, but by who governs daily life, maintains security, and provides basic necessities.
Yeah, at some point, some of these folks are just gonna admit that this is gonna be their new reality, and eventually they'll be okay with it. That's how it's gonna end, guys.
In this framework, humanitarian engagement is presented as practical evidence of authority. What emerges is a contrast in strategic focus. Ukraine and NATO emphasize international legitimacy and long-term outcomes, while Russia highlights present-day realities: territory held, civilians assisted, and frontlines stabilized. In this context, even limited advances are treated as meaningful progress. The combination of military movement and civilian engagement reflects Russia's broader approach to the conflict. The objective is not only to advance, but to remain. By pairing battlefield control with visible social presence, Moscow seeks to turn military gains into lasting influence. In the end, these scenes reveal a complexity often missing from simplified narratives. Behind every front line are civilians responding to whoever brings order into their lives. For Russia, these developments support a strategy focused not just on winning ground, but on shaping stability in the territories it now controls. Beyond the front lines, Russian officials increasingly emphasize governance as a key objective. Administrative structures, local coordination, and basic services are highlighted as priorities alongside military security. From Moscow's perspective, this signals a shift from temporary control toward long-term management of these territories. Infrastructure repair is often presented as another indicator of this transition. Roads, power lines, and public buildings in secured areas are gradually restored, according to Russian sources. While the scale of reconstruction remains limited by ongoing hostilities, the message is consistent. Normalization begins before the war fully ends.
It's gonna be a lot of work. It's gonna be a lot of projects, a lot of work.
Russian military analysts argue that this approach contrasts sharply with earlier phases of the conflict. Rather than rapid advances followed by instability, the current strategy focuses on holding ground, reducing vulnerability, and integrating into a controlled security environment. In this model, progress is measured in stability, not speed. For civilians living in these areas, daily priorities remain practical rather than political. Access to food, heating, medical care, and safety outweighs abstract debates about international legitimacy. Russian messaging frequently centers on this reality, framing its presence as a response to immediate human needs rather than ideological ambition. Ukraine, meanwhile, continues to invest heavily in diplomatic outreach and international messaging. Kyiv seeks to ensure that global attention remains fixed.
So what they call the paper tiger, right? So Russia is dealing with the reality of the action. Kiev in Ukraine, they're trying to diplomatically trying to win the appeal of the paper tiger.
On sovereignty
Paper tiger meaning it's law or international law that has no enforcement.
And legal frameworks, even as conditions on the ground evolve. This external focus, however, does little to influence the lived experiences of civilians in contested zones. NATO's role also remains largely indirect. While the alliance reinforces Ukraine militarily and politically, it avoids direct involvement on the ground. As a result, its influence is felt more in strategic planning rooms than in the villages where control is already decided by physical presence. From Russia's viewpoint, this gap between rhetoric and reality is critical. Moscow argues that legitimacy ultimately follows control, not declarations. By establishing order, delivering aid, and maintaining security, Russian authorities believe they are shaping facts that will outlast shifting political narratives.
Damn.
Taken together, these developments suggest that the conflict is entering a phase defined less by dramatic offensives and more by endurance. The struggle is no longer only about advancing lines on a map, but about who can sustain influence, manage territory, and define normal life for the people who remain.
That's interesting. Interesting. Seeing a lot of these folks are receiving Russia with open arms. That's another one, right? Yep. There you have it, guys. Let me know what you guys see in the comment section below. I think hopefully there's a cease to this, right? Because they're the same people, man. We cannot afford to just lose more men in this battlefield. Let me know what you guys see in the comment section below. I would love to hear you guys' opinions on this. I'll see you in the next one.